Good evening. I'm Greg Magruder, curator for global events at National Geographic, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this presentation in our Through the Lens photography series, Living Lullabies with photographer Hannah Reyes Morales. With this series, we take you behind the camera with some of the world's top photographers, giving you an up-close experience with all that is National Geographic. We'd like to thank our donors and supporters who make it possible for National Geographic to invest in and elevate the work of explorers around the world. To learn more about how to make a donation or how to support our programs, I invite you to visit nationalgeographic.org. Now, the talented photographers at National Geographic play a major role in helping us experience the world and all that is in it, but they don't do it alone. Working with them every step of the way is an equally talented group of photo editors who collaborate with every photographer to get an idea from the brain to the page. The person who worked with Hannah on Living Lullabies is Mallory Benedict. Mallory is a photo editor on the History and Culture desk for National Geographic magazine, where she uses the past to understand present-day issues through storytelling. So let's welcome Mallory as she introduces Hannah.
Thank you so much, Greg. I'm thrilled to be joining you tonight. Tonight, we're going to tell you a bedtime story. We all remember the stories that were read to us and lullabies sung to us in those hazy moments before drifting off to sleep, or when we've had to comfort a child we love in moments of stress. At this very moment, millions of caregivers across the world are putting children to sleep, singing them lullabies, reading them bedtime stories that confront and absolve their fears, and weaving the narratives of history and tradition together through their subconscious. This story is about them, but it's also about you. Photographer Hannah Reyes Morales is a Filipina photographer whose work documents tenderness amidst adversity and explores universal themes of diaspora and survival and the bonds that hold us together. She was a 2013 Young Explorer grantee and is part of the 2017 Young Explorer Leadership and Development Program. She has photographed several stories for National Geographic magazine, including this one, which can be found in the December 2020 issue. We encourage you to grab some headphones to best enjoy the experience, and we'll also be doing a Q&A afterwards with Hannah and a couple of special guests, so make sure to use the Ask a Question function at the bottom of your screen if you have any questions during the presentation. And now, joining us from the Philippines is Hannah Reyes Morales, the photographer and writer for this story. Hannah, I'll let you tell the story from here.
Let me tell you a story about a song. The song comes alive as night draws in. Hear it curl beneath the blanket, slip between the fold of cradling arms in rooms across the world. To an audience of children, a hidden chorus of caregivers fills the night with song. They're singing lullabies. We've been singing them for millennia. Inscribed on a clay tablet is a Babylonian lullaby that's about 4,000 years old. So the song you just heard is an interpretation of that lullaby by archaeomusicologist Richard Dumbrell. It's called Little Baby in the Dark House and was found in present-day Iraq. By the glow of a phone or to the thrum of the city, lullabies still charm babies to sleep today. I've spent the last year taking a closer look at lullabies. I wanted to know what lullabies meant to people, how they came by them, what they revealed of the circumstances in which they were sung. I wanted to know what bedtime looked and sounded like for families around the world. Lullabies are often understood as simple, soothing songs that help put children to sleep. But these songs, sung in our most intimate of spaces, as our days come to a close, hold far more. They're often complex, dynamic, and at times far from comforting. We started our journey at the Turkish-Syrian border, not far from Iraq, where the oldest lullaby tablet was found. For Mona, a Syrian refugee living in Turkey, the lullaby is a window into a caregiver's soul. Mona's 3 sons left their home in Syria to avoid being drafted into a war that has killed more than 500,000 people since 2011. A year after her last son left, Mona followed and crossed into Turkey. 5 years after the crossing, her eldest son, Mahmoud, and his wife had a baby, Zaid. So Mona became a grandmother. There is no one more precious than your child until you meet your grandchild, she says, referencing an Arabic saying. Mona describes how bedtime is fraught with risk for refugees. When Zaid would wake up crying in the middle of the night, their Turkish neighbors would threaten to call the police. The same complaint saw the previous tenants evicted. In love and fear, Mona would hold Zaid all night long, and she sang.
يلا ينام يلا ينام لهديله طير الحمام روح يا حمام لا تصدق بضحك على زيدو لينام نيمته بالعلية وخفت عليه من الحية وغنيله يا راضية بلكي ع صوتك بينام.
The audio you just heard is a blended soundscape of evening in Mona's home. As night washes over the city of Hatay, the call to prayer duets with Mona's lullaby. We carry lullabies across borders and make new ones along the way. They contain the traces of those who came before us, and they will carry traces of us long after we're gone. Within lullabies, we've inscribed not just our greatest fears, but in the same breath, our prayers, our hopes, and our reassurances. Mona tells us that she believes a lullaby can be many things. She said that for her, it's a prayer to God. Lullabies reveal the histories of those who sing them. Khadija left Syria for Turkey the same year that Mona left. She used to sing sweet lullabies to her eldest son, Mohammed, born a decade before the Syrian civil war. Songs passed down by her mother and grandmother, songs of heritage and place. As the conflict escalated, she left Syria, and her lullabies became songs about the war. By a mattress on the floor, Khadija gently lays Ahmad, her youngest, down on her legs, rocks him slowly, and sings. O aircraft, fly in the sky, and do not strike the children in the street. Be tender and kind to these children. Later on, Khadija muses, my children knew about my feelings. Here, as the day draws to a close, she is seen with her daughters Sadil and Bisan on the rooftop. The family comes together in the evening to share their experiences and feelings in song and poetry. Sadil, pictured here, often asks her mother about life in Syria. Khadija says she sings songs from Syria to give her children a sense of country. Khadija speaks of the nightmares that have haunted the family since they fled their home. She tells us how her family huddles around her, when she wakes up at night in tears. Sadness is part of our heritage, Khadija says. The war has brought a new sadness. We learned how families displaced by conflict have had to adapt their bedtime rituals, accommodating new environments and new challenges. Here, outside their home in the Boynayogon Temporary Accommodation Center in Hatay, Mustafa plays with his sister Aya. Behind them, you can see a woman peering through the barbed wire, gazing out. The landscape she's looking at is Syria. Mustafa often shows the view of Syria to his sisters, and he tells them stories about home. In this camp, bedtime is in two parts. It's too hot to play outside in the daytime, so the girls wake up from afternoon naps and they take to the playground at night. They cradle their dolls and they sing to them, pretending to put them to sleep, echoing the care that their own mothers give them. Like lullabies, the rituals of bedtime and care are an inheritance, learned and passed on through generations. Bedtime and lullabies are shaped by the physical world we live in. For Zaijan, a child in the Philippines, sleep is dictated by the tides of the sea. At night, he fishes with his father, falling asleep to the sound of the waves and the putt of the engine. His father, Umbing, tells me he learned to survive in a time of loss. With schools closed due to the COVID pandemic, and with his father under mounting pressure to meet the family's needs, Zaijan learned to fish. Umbing tells me later on that he worries about the changing climate. He describes how his catch has dwindled drastically over the last decade. In the daytime after fishing, I watch Zaijan rocking his sister Jazzy to sleep. Zaijan loves to sing, and often he sings to his sister, songs that he learned from singing in karaoke machines in his fishing community in Bataan.
Kaya't miling ako kay ba't alam na sana ay hindi na siya luwa pa, na sana lang ingatan mo siya.
I spend time with her family during a night off from fishing. For their mother, Amy, these nights of togetherness are precious and few, until the tides call her boys back to the sea. Sung in the most intimate of spaces, lullabies are likely to be the first love song we hear. In Liberia, we met Princess and her son. Princess was 16 when she first gave birth. In Liberia, about 1 in 3 girls are mothers by the time they're 19. At the news of her pregnancy, Princess's mother sent her away from home. The baby's father refused to recognize the baby as his child, leaving Princess to raise the baby Anointed on her own. Anointed is one of more than 320 million children worldwide growing up in a single-parent household. Princess and Anointed live in West Point, a thumb of land between Liberia's capital, Monrovia, and the Atlantic Ocean. Home to an estimated 75,000 people, it is widely known for deprivation and violent crime. Sea level rise has inundated much of the peninsula, compounding public health challenges. Baby Anointed, like so many children growing up in West Point, suffers from persistent malaria. Undaunted, Princess rocks Anointed to sleep. The boy will buy my car, the boy will build my house, she sings. Princess dreams of going back to school and becoming a human rights lawyer someday to fight for women and children's rights. In neighboring Mamba Point, Patience Brooks raises her 2 girls. She gave birth for the first time at 14. Here, survival is an exercise in community. While mothers make their living, community members share out the day-to-day tasks of childcare. As homes in this community are crammed together, the spaces outside become what feels like communal living rooms. Patience watches over dozens of her neighbors' children as they play and share, an impromptu daycare that allows mothers to prepare dinner for their family and homes for the night. Here, the community at Mamba Point huddles together. Once upon a time, patience begins, and the children listen. Later, they tell their own stories about kings and queens, forests, and magic creatures. Bedtime at Patience's home is an animated affair. The neighborhood thrums with music, the scrape of dinner time, and conversation. Her nighttime song parries these in a crossover of song, scat, and beatbox, known locally as lai-lais, because they're made up. They're vibrant, explosive, largely nonverbal songs, and unique to each singer. Patience drums against Marta's back as the pair bump and sway, and often Marta falls asleep to her mother's dancing. I sing to forget the baby's paw, Patience Brooks says.
Don't cry, baby. Mama na anyas. Don't cry, baby. Papa la kapakli. Don't cry, baby. Bam 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 bam. Do do do. Bam bam bam. Do do. A boom 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 boom. A boom 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 boom. Ba 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 ba. Do 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 do. Ba 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 ba.
While we met mostly single mothers, we also met men in the community who took on caring responsibilities. Here, a group of migrant men from Sierra Leone helped take care of Rafael, the son of a teen mom in West Point. I saw them singing songs from Sierra Leone to the baby. We saw mothers as they faced heightened practical, economic, and psychosocial challenges as caregivers, but we also saw their communities, offering respite from these challenges. Christiana is among the teenage mothers raising children in West Point. She was 14 when she gave birth to Georgina. When her parents found out about her pregnancy, they sent her away and she had to live in the streets. Here, she sits inside a small room, the first roof over her head after years of spending bedtime in the streets. In her lullaby, she sings, "After a while, my change will come." Around the world, communities face different obstacles. One of the world's coldest capitals is Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. To stay warm in winters that reach the -40 degrees, families burn coal, one of several factors that result in hazardous levels of air pollution during the winter. Air pollution disproportionately harms children in what UNICEF has called a child health crisis. It's also been linked to declines in sleep health. In this kindergarten, in one of the most polluted communities in the city, children are seen at nap time. The center is one of the only places where they can get purified air. Caregivers at the center use lullabies to help children from turbulent homes go to sleep. Studies have found that trauma causes disruption in sleep, but sleep can help heal trauma. The lullaby is a bridge between. To the sound of a mobile phone playing the Buvendu, a Mongolian lullaby, children rest in the middle of their day. We met Badam Garav, one of the mothers who sent her children to this daycare. She's a single mom living with her 3 kids. She says, "When I sing the lullaby, I feel I am able to give my children twice the love." The pollution in the city has prompted some families to move into the province to breathe fresher air. Oyunchimeg, pictured here, recalls the lullaby she sang when her children were sickened by the air back when they were living in the city. "I use these words to protect my children. They help my children heal." Oyunchimeg sings the traditional Buvendu, but in between refrains, she whispers healing words, reshaping a long-established song into the present time. The coal that keeps Mongolian homes warm is the same coal that pollutes the city. In Nailak, known for producing much of Mongolia's raw coal, Dajid's family gets ready for bed. Her husband worked for 25 years in the coal mining industry. As the Ulaanbaatar government begins campaigns to ban raw coal in its districts, the landscape of Nailak is rapidly changing. In Dejid's home, nighttime rituals are a way to keep steady in the revolving environment. The Mongolian home, a ger or yurt, is one shared space, so the lights go out for everyone at the same time. Dajid's lullaby transports the family away from the pressures of the next breath, ushering in a magical night.
Найртай цэлмэг өдөрөө өнгөрч найргийн цэнхэр шоон айсви зүудний хүлгөр одонд аялаад зум билгийн мөнгөн шүнэсви.
I was in Massachusetts during the beginning of the pandemic, and I documented bedtimes there. The pandemic has changed the pattern of life for families all over the world. For the Hallett family, it's meant more time together at home. Their family, Jessica, Ava, Anthony, and Luke, sing together a lullaby to their youngest before bedtime.
Good night, Luke. Good night, Luke. Good night, Luke. It's time to go to bed.
Good
Night, Luke. Good night, Luke. Good night, Luke. It's time to go to bed.
Anthony is pictured here during bedtime with his daughter Ava. He reads My Magical Sparkling Curls with her before she goes to sleep. Anthony says, with what's going on in the world, I want to be the dad that's like, listen, Daddy's here to protect you. I'm not going to let anything harm you or hurt you, but just know, Daddy's always here to protect you. Often, he falls asleep beside her after days at work. As the pandemic began altering life across the world, physical distancing drastically changed the way we connect. Women comprise nearly 70% of health and social service workers. For mothers working on the front line of the pandemic, putting themselves at risk to care for their communities comes with the additional challenge of caring for their own families at home.
So you're going to sing this bit then?
Yeah. They have
He chases.
up and pigeons up and down. He waves the legs, I'm sure. Mum and Dad shall stand. Come in this door and frown.
Can't quite get the chords right for this one.
Baby Delaney,
With
mother
one is your
is your mother home with you? So happy. Oh, you tired, girl.
These videos show essential workers from around the world, Pauline, Chris, and Molly, who've had to isolate from their families. They use video calls to join their families at bedtime. Molly, pictured here, isolates from her family on weeks where she works with COVID-19 positive patients and wishes them good night from the Massachusetts General Hospital. She and her wife Hannah have 2 daughters, Ada and Delaney. Here they are at home the week before Molly left, reading bedtime stories and singing together. Allison, a nurse from Bridgewater, Massachusetts, who works in a hospital's intensive care unit, also separated from her family during the crisis. In her isolation, she took few belongings with her, but among them were two of her son Lucas's favorite books. At night, she calls and reads to him before he goes to bed. I accompanied Allison on one of her days off as she visited the home she could not enter. Before his nap, she read stories to him through a glass storm door. She gives her son a high five and a kiss, and with a glass between them, they do not touch. I miss singing to him, she says. But lullabies also go beyond the song we can hear. In Massachusetts, I met Xavier. He's deaf and uses cochlear implants. Xavier's sunny disposition spurred the family's sign language teacher to give Xavier the sign name X Happy. Research has shown that parental singing can improve speech perception for children with hearing impairments, so parents often use song to help deaf and hard of hearing kids. Here, Xavier is seen just as the lights go out, holding his doll, who has a cochlear implant too. With Xavier's condition, doctors have told Jessica they're unsure how the implants may change for him in the future. At night, they sing and sign their lullaby together.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are.
It was a wonder to me to see and hear the song of a child who hears the world so differently. After singing their lullaby, Jessica tells him I love you every night. I make sure to tell him in case it's the last thing he hears, she says. To sing a lullaby to someone is to make a connection. They connect caregiver to child, but perhaps less noticeably, in this everyday song are stories that connect us to our past and to each other. Over the course of the story, I found myself in so many different bedscapes, watching and listening as caregivers, amidst their own disquiet, created safe spaces from which dreams could unfold. This myriad of lullabies revealed to me that our fears can be used to forge our reassurances. As I listen to these songs, I am reminded that I am not alone, and in the dark of night, they seem to hold a promise that on the other side waits the light of morning. Salamat at mabuhay.
Хүлтэй хөөртэй өдөрөө өнгөрч хүслийн цэнхэр шоонасэ бодлын хөлгөр одонд аялаад боллоор мөнгөн шүннэсэ.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back. We're going to now have a conversation with Hannah and a couple of special guests. Don't forget that we are live right now, so please feel free to ask any questions you may have in the Ask a Question function at the bottom of your screen. We'll be collecting them, and we'll answer your questions here in a few minutes. I want to just start by saying collaboration is such a huge part of what we do at National Geographic. And even though Hannah and I are speaking to you today, there are so many people who went into putting this story together and people that we worked with, both in the countries that Hannah reported in and also on our team at National Geographic. And a few of them are joining us today in the chat as well. Rupert Compston, who was the audio producer, Cosima Amalang, who worked with us on mobile production and video, Deborah Adams Simmons, who's the text editor on the story, and Roberto Zambrano, who created those amazing illustrations that you just saw. So feel free to ask any questions you may have for those folks in the chat, and they will respond in there. So to start us off, Hannah, I'd like to welcome you back to our virtual stage tonight as well. We've been talking about this story for several years. It's been a couple of years since I remember we first had a conversation about it, and I still never get tired of seeing those images and hearing those amazing lullabies. So just to start us off, how did you come up with this idea?
Thanks so much, Mallory. I think growing up, I had always been singing soothing songs to myself in moments of stress. When I was really confused, I would sing to myself very softly. My mother was a single mother, and I was raised by multiple women, different women from her own community. And I realized that I was singing songs and that were coming from different people and different backgrounds. Some of them were Filipino folk songs that were in the dialect that I spoke. Some of them were rock ballads. Some of them were praise songs. And it was really varied from caregiver to caregiver. And I find myself still coming back to them. So in many ways, I was always carrying lullabies inside me. And a few years ago, I happened to sing a lullaby for the first time to my stepson, Dan. He was visiting our home for the first time in the city. And it was the middle of the night at 2 or 3 a.m. He started crying, and I started panicking because I was confused about what to do. So I pick him up, and I was so scared, and I realized that I started singing. And then he fell asleep, his tears dried. But at the end of it, I started wondering whose fears had I really been assuaging. And so after that, I really started to think about lullabies much more closely. I started asking, just friends and loved ones about lullabies. As a photographer, I started covering high harm environments. I covered the Philippine drug war, and there was a moment in my coverage where I saw a family singing a lullaby to a child who was woken up by gunfire. And then when I saw that, I told myself that I really, really wanted to look at lullabies more closely and to look at them as ways that caregivers make safer spaces for children. And then I started doing more research and writing and going really, really deeply into the world of lullabies.
Amazing. Yes, I remember I was so excited when you came to me with this pitch, and I instantly knew that, yes, I wanted to work on it, and I wanted to work on it with you, and I'm glad that it's out in the world right now. I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. Using audio was really important for us with this story, and creating this really immersive, as you call them, bedscape that really will take the readers of National Geographic and the viewers of things like our Instagram into the rooms themselves. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of including audio in the story, and had you ever worked with audio before? I know you worked with Rupert on it. What was that like?
I always knew that, of course, when you're doing a story on lullabies, you've had to have audio, right? But I'd never worked very closely with an audio producer before, at least in this scale. And it was very interesting. Firstly, I always wanted to know what a picture could sound like. And that's sort of what I was thinking through when I was thinking through the imagery and the audio for this. I wanted to make sure that they matched each other. But of course, in matching them, of course, there's a lot of challenges. Rupert and I were constantly fighting over spaces. These are tiny little spaces with children who, are sometimes not quite ready yet for bedtime, or, sometimes because they're higher energy. And it was really challenging because while, we spend a lot of time with the family and getting the children comfortable with us, and we wanted to be as minimally disruptive to their nighttime ritual, I think what was really interesting is that the arc of bedtime or the act of the lullaby really happens, at most maybe a 7-minute window. And so sometimes Rupert and I would be elbowing each other. I was stepping, I was moving around, and that would get in his audio, or his microphone would get in my frame, and what all of that at the same time. We had to be like as quiet as possible and sitting in the dark in like dark little rooms to make sure we're not super disruptive to the babies. So that was really interesting, and I am really proud of how we navigated that, actually, because I realized, each child and each family is so different. There were some children, of course, who were very, very comfortable with having new people in the house. There were some children, of course, who were just more curious and wanted to grab my camera or, explore like the audio kit of Rupert. And so I was really proud of how we navigated that, and sort of how we made ourselves as invisible as possible, considering how much equipment we were bringing into a child's bedroom. And in the end, I think, I always look at the story and I look at it as like all the elements work together in order to bring the story to, its fullness. Like, I don't think that the photos are as powerful without the audio. And I think the audio is enriched by the imagery, and all of it, is tied together by the text or the thought and the language around it. And the interesting ideas that we're sort of putting in. So I really thought of this project as just its own little sort of like ecosystem almost.
Yeah, and I think that that's a theme that we wanted to carry through the whole story. So even in the magazine, which I happen to have right here, you can, when you're looking at the pictures, we wanted people to be able to look at the pictures and, where am I? And also be able to hear the songs. So I think this is the first time we've tried this, but we inserted these QR codes at the bottom throughout this piece. And if you scan them just using the camera on your phone, it will take you to a YouTube site where you can actually hear the lullaby from that country, and sometimes from the person in the picture. And of course, we wanted to integrate them on our digital story as well. So I hope that you all are able to check that out and experiment with it, because like Hannah said, I agree, one can't really exist without the other, and the two working together really create this incredible experience, which was really fun to work on for me as well. So, Hannah, we started planning this coverage 2 years ago, and we had this whole list and this whole big plan of where we wanted to go and why and how we wanted to photograph in each place. But then 2020 came along and everything changed, and we could not have predicted, what would happen in 2020. Nevertheless, the kind of circumstances in which the story would publish. I mean, this is still an incredibly hard time for so many people around the world. How do you think the visceral need for human connection right now adds to the gravity of the story? And what was going through your mind when COVID hit and you were in Massachusetts?
I think it was really, of course, when the pandemic was first happening and we were all sort of monitoring the situation, and we were all sort of in a state of shock for how quickly the world was changing. We had a few places that we still wanted to go to, and pre-reporting that was already done. So I think in the start of it, I was super set with, where we wanted to go with it. But as soon as I was in Massachusetts and I sort of got locked down there, as soon as I started, being adaptable to the situation and trying to see or ask myself the question, so what is happening to bedtime rituals, and what is happening to lullabies, and how is it still relevant in the middle of the situation? Then I think it was really, that's sort of when we managed to pivot the story. And I think I think it was really still surprising to see what was happening in terms of technology. We met a lot of grandmothers in the story who said that they were worried that lullabies weren't happening anymore because of technology. And during the pandemic, I saw how these essential workers were actually using technology in order to be able to still sing lullabies to their children. And in the context of safer space making, I found it really powerful, because I always believed that care and safer space making was a very physical act. Like to keep each other close is one of the ways we keep each other safe. In this pandemic, the complete opposite happened. To keep each other safe, we need to physically distance. And so it was really wonderful to see how bedtime rituals and lullabies managed to connect people who were keeping their distance from their loved ones. And I thought that was really, really, really powerful and a really interesting way to show how lullabies are still alive and are still relevant in today's time.
Yeah, and perhaps even more necessary for so many folks. The Essential Workers video compilation really melts my heart every time I see it. And some of the people that you met while you were in Massachusetts were Xavier Zakrajic and his family. And now, if you remember from the presentation, Xavier is now 7 and he's deaf with a cochlear implant. And Hannah, you met him and his family to photograph their bedtime rituals. And now I'd actually like to welcome to the virtual stage Xavier and his mother, Jessica. Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
We're so excited for you to join us kind of in real life. This is really exciting.
Yeah, I still have all my energy.
So Jessica, can you describe your nightly bedtime ritual with Xavier and explain why it's so important for you two and your family?
Well, I know, as Hannah said while she was here, it's probably one of the more playful bedtime routines. Xavier is full of energy, and it takes a lot to get it out of him. So typically, you go up and you brush your teeth and you get your jammies on, right?
Yeah, I'm still very energetic.
Yep. And then we usually pick a book. I pick a book for you to read, and you pick a book for me to read, which has changed because now you're in first grade and he can read a lot better. Typically, his dad will come up and he'll play a kind of a fun game. It depends on what TV show he's into at the time. Sometimes it's Troll Hunters.
Yeah.
You like Troll Hunters?
Yeah.
And then we sing a song. Usually we sing You Are My Sunshine. That's kind of our special song. And at the very end, the last line is, please don't take my sunshine away. And then Daddy comes in and what does he do?
Take me away.
He takes you away from me. He takes my sunshine away.
Yep, then I get back.
And then he comes back. And then we tuck you in and I tell you I love you. And we turn on your night lights and then he goes to bed.
Are you going to do that later tonight, Xavier?
Yeah.
That sounds great. Do you all want to sing and sign a song for us now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ready?
Take it away, Xavier.
Ready?
Yeah.
We're going to do Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Again, okay?
Yeah.
Right.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. I like to do that.
Yay. Woo. Great job.
Thank you.
So Xavier and Jessica, what was it like for you two to be part of this project and share your story with Hannah and National Geographic?
Well, I thought it was a lot of fun. At that point, we were still only about a month into our lockdown. So it was kind of exciting to see a new person. And Xavier, do you like to meet new people?
Yeah, I always make new friends.
Did you have fun working with Hannah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What was your favorite part of Hannah coming over?
That she took pictures of me.
That she took pictures of you. Yeah.
She took great pictures of you.
Good.
What's your favorite part?
Ride with that Duffy.
Yeah. Especially one that's in the magazine.
Yeah. I didn't know that would happen.
You didn't know your picture would be in the magazine?
Yeah, and we got 5. We noticed that you put them in Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, they're in Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, you're in Barnes and Noble, Xavier. How cool is that?
Good. And we bought 5.
Yeah, okay, that's enough.
Oh, well, yeah. And Hannah, I mean, what was it like for you to work with the Zakrajiks?
It was really wonderful. It's always, I think, when I visit different families, they sort of reveal different things to me about lullabies. And of course, seeing how lullabies are signed as well was a really sort of like this visceral experience. Xavier, I wanted to ask you actually, what's your favorite part of your bedtime ritual?
You know.
What is it? Nobody else knows.
The sun.
The song.
The song.
Yeah. And You Are My Sunshine was kind of special when he had this implant put on his left side.
And this one's been dying a lot
I know,
earlier.
you need a new battery.
Yeah.
I think the first words that he recognized from me that weren't just beeps was "You Are My Sunshine" because we sing it every night. So he was able to sing along and recognize the words.
Yep.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you two so much for joining us. And actually, for those following along, Jessica and Xavier are sticking around. So if you have any questions for them, we can bring them back in to answer those a little bit later.
Can I ask a question to Hannah?
Yeah, of course.
I'm curious what it was like for Hannah to be invited into such an intimate, precious time as such as the bedtime ritual into families' lives.
I think for me, it was really the greatest honor because, I became a photographer because I wanted to explore. And I think I always felt most powerfully when I was photographing inside people's homes. And I think when I was first imagining the story and I was imagining lullabies, I had this vision in my head of so many different houses at night. And all of them, had different lullabies playing in them. And so for me, it was really, really powerful to get to be given sort of like consent and permission to be able to document that. And I don't take that for granted. When I was with you guys, with your family, when I was working with all the families in this story, every day was really a gift. And every day, every time I'm inside someone's home, that's a really special feeling. And I don't know, I think that's really my favorite part of of this whole process. It's actually being with people and being able to connect and being able to ask questions and being able to really share and make connections. So it was really, really special. And I'm very, very, very grateful for you guys for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah. No, Mom, now can we go?
No.
It's also close to my bedtime.
I know, but you get to stay up a little extra tonight.
And my brother has to sleep.
We'll see.
Well, thank you two so much. We'll only keep you a little bit longer in case anyone has any questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Boom. So Hannah, I just have one more question for you before we get into folks' questions. A lot of good questions are coming in, so thank you all. One of the things that I love most about this story is the universality of this tradition. As you talked about in your presentation, there's a lullaby in the story that is 4,000 years old. So clearly this has been going on for a long time and all over the world. And a lot of the lullabies, I've heard them a few times now. The ones that get stuck in my head are from languages that I don't even understand. And so can you talk a little bit about like the significance about kind of like the resonance with people despite, not maybe even being able to understand them?
Right. Yeah, one of the most powerful moments in the story was actually listening to the 4,000-year-old lullaby in the middle of my reporting. So I was looking at the 4,000-year-old lullaby, or I was listening to the 4,000-year-old lullaby, and then going back out into the field and seeing how lullabies still exist today. And so to be able to make that connection from millennia into today was a really significant experience for me when working on this story. I think listening to people's different lullabies and how diverse lullabies really are was also a really wonderful and powerful experience, because I guess there's no singular way to soothe someone. There's no singular way to put a child to sleep. There's all different factors in people's different bedscapes. And of course, caregivers are adapting to those factors. We saw how in Liberia, the lullaby was very different from the one in Mongolia, very different from the ones in Turkey. And while they were all, very unique and unique to each singer, what's common to all is the fact that they're quite soothing. And Samuel Mayer, who I interviewed in this story, he works at Harvard Music Lab, said to me that, of course, while lullabies are super diverse, you have a very interesting common set of constraints for parents, and that's to put a child to sleep. So while any song can be a lullaby, the way that the caregivers are expressing themselves and the way caregivers are, sort of singing to the child, the same constraint of having to soothe the child and to put the child to sleep sort of is a way that sort of these songs connect with each other throughout different countries, throughout different borders, and also through time.
Wonderful, thank you. We actually have a question along those same lines from Marty. Is there a common thread that runs across countries, cultures, and lullabies that you noticed?
Yeah, I think, as I said earlier, the fact that they're all, they tend to have a collection of features that make them soothing. And so, going back to the research that I had mentioned earlier by Samuel Mayer's lab, he interviewed people and asked them to identify different types of song. And statistically, people seem to be most consistent at identifying lullabies, actually. So it's one of the more recognizable songs that we know of. And so while the music is diverse, the lyrics are very different because obviously every caregiver is different. The fact that they are comforting to us, the fact that they are soothing to us, even when their lyrics are frequently dark, is one of the things that I found really, really powerful in terms of how they connect us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about some of the lullabies that were sung to me as a child, and some of them do have kind of a bit of a darker message or warnings even. So, but nevertheless, they put me to sleep. So that's pretty interesting that kind of transcends cultures as well. We have another question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Anna.
I wanted to talk about the darkness and the melancholy and the fear in a lot of lullabies, actually, which is one of the things that most interested me at first when I was beginning my research. Around the world, that's a very common theme around in lullabies, that they're actually frequently dark. And I think it made sense to me once I was speaking with scientists who were studying the science of maternal song, in particular Laura Sorelli. And she was saying, infant directed singing, it's not necessarily about the lyrics, right? It's about the rhythm, the melody. It's this multimodal experience, which means that the lullaby isn't really about the song. It's this whole experience. It's about the gentle rocking of the mother. It's about holding the baby and feeling the baby feeling its mother's face very close and feeling the gentle rocking. So it's this multimodal experience. And the lullaby, what makes a lullaby soothing is sort of the tactile quality of the lullaby and the rhythm and the melody of the lullaby. Meanwhile, for the lyrics, it's sort of a way, it's this one space where a caregiver can then express something that's for themselves, and so I think a lot of the time, caregivers are expressing their fears, expressing their worries, putting in warnings to the baby, and really expressing what's in their heart at the end of, a long day.
And another question, did you ever see children contributing to the shaping of lullabies, or did you notice that it was mostly or always shaped by the caregiver?
What was interesting about this story was, of course, I think the lullabies are most common, I think, for babies, or at least that's what we observed. A lot of the mothers that we knew who had multiple children were lullabying the baby, and then maybe not singing lullabies for their child to sleep anymore. They were either reading a bedtime story, wishing them good night, and soothing them in other ways. But the lullaby itself was often for the baby. very specifically for the baby. And so when we were in homes where there were multiple children, of course, the elder children would often get involved in lullabying their younger sibling. And often it was, a very collaborative way for parents to include the entire family in the lullaby ritual. And that was the wonderful thing about it. It isn't just mother and child, it becomes the entire family. Sometimes it's grandma, sometimes it's a neighbor. And it's very dynamic in that way. We also saw children who wanted, actually, we have a stuffed animal picture in the story. And we witnessed a lot of children who were singing to their stuffed animals. And so they were, echoing what their mothers were doing and singing to them at night. And some of them wanted me to photograph them lullabying their stuffed animals. So of course, yes, the children are very much involved in the lullaby process.
Oh, that's so sweet. I love that. I love those stuffed animal pictures that you created in each place you visited as well. We actually have another question kind of similar to that, and this might be the last question that we have time for, but it's a really important one, and I know that you and I were really conscious of this as the story evolved in its reporting. The question is, have you documented a story where the father, brother, uncle, or any male figure sang the lullaby? I noticed that most that sang, even in this person's own experience, the grandmother would sing to them. I wonder how common it is for dads, brothers, and uncles, etc., to sing lullabies.
Well, I don't really have the data on how common it is for fathers to sing lullabies. I definitely saw a lot of men who were very involved in the lullaby ritual. So, Anthony was part of the singing. He was there in the story that we presented earlier. The men in Sierra Leone who were helping with childcare were singing songs from Sierra Leone to these babies from Liberia. And that was, from a very different culture. So yes, we did see a lot of fathers who were involved in the singing and in the bedtime ritual. And I thought that was a really, really powerful thing to see as well, how involved the dads could be. For Xavier's family, for example, his dad was very much part of the bedtime ritual. He would come in the end and make it very playful. So often it's like when parents are collaborating with on the lullaby, it sort of adds a different aspect and adds a different dimension to the song, which I thought was really, really interesting.
Yeah, I remember we were initially kind of thinking of this as a women's focused story, and then kind of felt that it was actually quite important to make sure that you could tell that this was a family experience in a lot of cases, and also that men play a huge role in bedtime rituals. So I am really glad that we incorporated that into the story and featured folks like Anthony in the piece. One final question, I guess, to close us out. How did you choose the protagonists or the people in each of these stories? How did you find them? How did we kind of decide which narratives to follow?
That was one of the, I guess, the trickiest parts of the pre-reporting. Lullabies are so universal and lullabies are happening everywhere. And it was it was an interesting challenge to decide where to go. And then when we decided where to go, who we would document. And I think, that's actually one of the important things that I tell people when I tell people about the story is that, we're scratching the surface here, and it's a fraction of the myriad of lullabies that happen around the world. One of the things that I had mentioned earlier was my first moments where I realized the power of lullabies was happening in a high harm environment. And I think that I wanted to look at narratives in particular where the lullaby could reflect something greater, to not look at just the song, but to see what the song says about some of the most important issues in the global agenda: migration, conflict, climate change, air pollution, accessibility. Those were things that were important to me. And I wanted to make sure that we were showing that the lullaby is relevant to all these critical issues. And I wanted to use the lullaby also as a touch point for people to maybe, know something different about the world. from a song and a ritual that might be very relatable to them. I think that covering all these issues is very important, but bringing people in is also really important, and finding a way for people to engage deeply with environments and realities that are very different from their own. So I think we wanted to be sure that the lullabies that we covered a diverse range of families and a diverse range of home formats. And I thought that, what we chose and how we portrayed it sort of, gives us a taste of really different experiences and different styles of bedtime routines.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of that insight. And thanks to everyone who asked questions and joined us tonight. I'd like to thank also our special guests, Jessica and Xavier, for hopping into the call and sharing your story. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good bedtime, Xavier.
Good night, Xavier.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
And if you're looking for to read the story, you can find it on our website, nationalgeographic.com, or it's on the newsstands in the December issue. So thank you so much again to Hannah. I'm amazed at all you were able to achieve with this story, and I'm so thrilled that I got to work with you on it.
Thank you, Mallory. And thank you everybody for coming.